Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. Our mission is to bring you great interviews with preppers from around the world so you can be better informed and better prepared for everything from a hurricane to the end of the world as we know it. Hey Preppers and Patriots, American Meltdown, the long-awaited sequel to American Exit Strategy, is now available in Kindle and paperback. In American Meltdown, Book 2 of the Economic Collapse Chronicles, the new president, Anthony Howe, signs an executive order banning all semi-automatic weapons. Matt, Adam, and Wesley Baer begin training with their local militia for the battle that is coming. Within weeks of the inauguration, the $700 trillion derivatives bubble pops when rates on U.S. debt skyrocket. The derivatives crisis is the final nail in the coffin of the banking system and the death of the fiat currency system in America. With the dollar gone, commerce comes to a screeching halt. While times prove to be tough for all, survival favors the prepared. Get your Kindle or paperback copy of American Meltdown, Book 2 of the Economic Collapse Chronicles on Amazon today. Today's guest is Joe Nobody. Joe is the author of several fiction and nonfiction books, including The Teotihuacan Tuxedo, The Homeschooled Shootist, Without Rule of Law, and the Holding Their Own series. Joe, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, I know you can't get into specifics, but can you just tell us what you can about your background and experience?
Well, I have served my country in one form or another for over 30 years. And that includes, when I say serve, that also includes quite a bit of private military contracting work. As my bio on Amazon says, I've done various jobs for just about every government agency you can think of, and probably a couple nobody's ever heard of. I'm really a lifelong prepper, although I openly admit that I did not know what the word meant before, I would guess, about 5 or 6 years ago now. I always referred to myself as a survivalist. And, of course, as we all know, there is a difference between a survivalist and a prepper. That might be a gray line in there somewhere or two, but, there is kind of a basic difference. And really that's about as far into it as I'm going to go.
Very good. That's good enough. But now, because of your work, you have a little bit of an inside scoop into the cogs and gears of government. So, in your opinion, do they seem to be preparing for something?
I think the various agencies are a little more aware of several factors, and to the outside person, to someone who's just observing from a distance or maybe at a higher level, you can see it, you can weave whatever tale or logic or reasoning you want out of it. Let me give you an example. There were numerous articles, and the prepper community was quite interested in all of the ammunition that the Department of Homeland Security was ordering some time ago. And when you dive into that a little bit deeper and the facts started surfacing and coming out, part of that huge amount of ammunition, I forget what the total millions of rounds were, but part of that was just the way that the government buys ammunition, just the way that they negotiate the contracts. They negotiate contracts for the worst case scenario. They do a full lot type of purchasing, and then they order down off of that worst case scenario as the years go by. So in that particular instance, you saw a case where, initially the facts and initially what was reported in the media really made you scratch your head. How could they possibly need more ammunition for the Department of Homeland Security than what the U.S. Army and Marine Corps used up in 2 full-blown wars? Just didn't make sense. But then later on, the facts leak out and say, oh, okay, it's just a trick of numbers for purchasing, requisitioning. So in that particular scenario, no. Are they buying some equipment that I think is maybe a little over the top? Are they paying a little bit? Yes. Are they paying too much attention to the what they call a homegrown terrorist or a homegrown revolutionary, and preparing a little bit, for the David Koresh syndrome? You'll hear government people talk about. You'll also hear the Wounded Knee scenario that happened up in the Dakotas several years ago, where there was a standoff for an extended length of time. Yes, you'll hear folks focused on that work in these government agencies, and man, you guys are getting a little paranoid. You guys are getting, and you're causing everybody else to be paranoid. Are they preparing for something? I think they're more worried about homegrown terrorist organizations. They're more worried about religious zealots, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, you pick your faith, but they're worried about these internal to the U.S. inside of our border organizations that are well armed, sometimes very well funded. And that's really what I think their primary focus is, not that they're expecting a armed revolt of any sort or having to put down something like that. I want to follow up this conversation with some time ago, about 4 or 5 years back, I was at a tactical training class. Some very serious players there. And there were both law enforcement, SWAT teams, and military. And after the class was over, everybody's around cleaning weapons and packing and getting their gear sorted out and all that sort of thing. The conversation kind of went around about, if you were ordered to confiscate firearms, would you do it? If that came down through your department or your unit, would you do it? Would you execute those orders? And it was really interesting to me that the vast majority of the military guys said no. Absolutely. Will not do it. Second Amendment, I'm not going there. The law enforcement group was mixed. They were, the ones who did say that they would, said if I don't, they'll just fire me and get somebody else that will. Others, of course, were, again, adamant. No, I wouldn't do that. That's Second Amendment. So when we talk about the government and conspiracy, most of the government guys are us. Most of the government employees are your neighbor or the person you sit next to in church on Sunday or whatever. Are there situations that get out of hand? Are there abuses of power? Always. There always have been and there always will be. But do I think that our government is getting ready to do a major operation to either restrict our rights more, or are they preparing for an economic collapse and an open revolt because of that? No, I don't believe that.
Yeah, what you said about when they get nervous, it kind of makes everybody else nervous. That was very well said. If you're in a room full of guys and the guy with the biggest gun starts getting nervous, that shakes up everybody, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So, what inspired you to start writing?
I was giving tactical rifle classes in my later years of my profession. I'm 53. And my knees and back won't hump a rock at high altitude anymore, at least not at the pace required by a lot of the type of work I was doing. And so I kind of semi-retired into private security and instruction, And I started having folks show up at the classes, civilians, who were a lot more interested in security type matters, almost questions a beginning infantry men would have before they were deployed to a combat zone, and kind of dug into why were these people asking you these questions. Yeah, it was a tactical rifle class, but they wanted to know a whole lot more than anything about defending their home against kick burglars or that sort of thing. And come to find out, a lot of them were preppers. So what I did, the first book, Holding Your Ground, I wrote a pamphlet, really. It was about a 35-page pamphlet, and it addressed a lot of the questions that I got over and over again. I don't know if you've ever been to a 3-day class or a 2-day class, but there's never enough time to go through everything you want to go through, let alone extra stuff. And I would hand this out to people who were interested. And a lot of people read it and said, yo, that's not too bad. That's exactly what I wanted. You ought to turn that into a book. And that's really what got me started.
And then that turned into your fiction series, Holding Their Own?
Well, I've been on and off an instructor for years, and I found that a lot of people learn better in a scenario-based environment rather than just going down through A, B, C, and D. And I'm not the only one. This goes back, the Christian Bible, Jesus taught by parable. And it's a very common method of instruction. So I really wrote the first fiction book to take the instruction and wrap story around it. Make it something that somebody could follow, mainly because a lot of people learn better, easier, absorb quicker that way. And of course, then the fiction became really popular, and the next thing I know, I'm receiving hundreds, sometimes thousands of emails. When are you going to write the next one? And that really pushed me that direction.
So can you tell us real briefly what the premise is behind the Holding Their Own series?
Sure. The premise behind Holding Their Own is a weak economy, a U.S. economy, is tipped over, pushed over the edge by a series of, a lot of people have said they're very creative terrorist attacks. And the story is now 7 books long, over 1 million words, and it is about Bishop and Terry. Bishop is a private security guy, works for an oil company. Terry's a bank teller. And Bishop's pretty good. Bishop's got a little superhero in him. I mean, it would be boring, right, if he was just a regular old guy.
Sure.
And Bishop's pretty skilled and not afraid to walk into a gunfight. And it is the story of them. They try to survive in Houston. They can't. They bug out for West Texas, encounter, a lot of the scenarios preppers think about or are concerned about on the way. And then the books proceed on. They try to reorganize some of the towns and communities. It goes through a lot of what a lot of experts think will be the first reorganization. Some will be criminal elements. Some will be religious elements of society trying to pull itself back together, and what the interaction of all that is. And all throughout the 1 million words, I try to weave in as many realistic bishop skills, obviously, in the situations they run into. I mean, Murphy's Law, as one reviewer said, seems to visit this couple throughout their adventures. But I try to weave in as many realistic survival tips, prepper tips and tricks as I can.
And like you said, prepper fiction, that's a very useful tool for teaching. It's another good thing about it is it makes you run through that scenario in your own mind, and you think about how you would do if you were in the protagonist situation, if you're in Bishop's situation, and you analyze, well, would my preps be sufficient to get me through that situation, or would my skill set be sufficient to get me through that situation? It kind of shows you where your own weaknesses are and where you need to improve on. Now, prepper fiction, do you think it could also be a useful tool for waking people up that may be a little bit asleep to the things that are going on around us?
I think I've had a lot of people comment or email or provide feedback that, yes, they hadn't thought of that particular scenario. They hadn't realized, for example, I don't know if you've ever read the 9/11 Commission report, and I've not read the whole thing. I have studied it for various reasons. But economically, the impact of the towers coming down was a lot more intense than anybody knew, I think, or than that the average public knew. And we were in an economy that was pretty robust at the time. We were on a growth curve, and it was surprising. If it would have been much worse, we could have very easily fallen into a depression. And now, if the same thing were to happen today with the economy in the state that it's in, it's very difficult to say how bad things would get. It's kind of difficult to put your thumb on it. You could go the same route with Katrina, although the economic impact of that wasn't nearly as deep, but a natural disaster could do something, a major earthquake, a volcano, pick your scenario. So a lot of people have said, yes, I never thought about that. I never considered that. I never thought that through, but that makes sense. That's realistic, even though it's fiction enough that it could happen. Another fiction book that I have written is Apocalypse Drift, and its scenario is a cyber attack, which causes a massive failure of the grid. It was funny. We published that book, and a month later, the president did his State of the Union address and spent about 5 minutes talking about how weak our infrastructure is to cyber attack. I thought our timing was pretty good on that one. Some of the scenarios in prepper fiction, I think they really open people's eyes to the potential or the weaknesses that surround them that we just don't think about every day.
Yeah, Janet Napolitano said that it was basically a certainty that sooner or later we will get hit with a massive cyber attack, and that we're very vulnerable.
Absolutely, and the scenario in Apocalypse Drift actually happened to one of our coworkers. One of our coworkers went to file their tax return a couple of years ago, and the IRS came back and said, "You've already filed your tax return." No, I would know that. It was kind of the response. "Oh no, I've got your tax return right here." And it was a heck of a mess. They initially wanted my coworker to give back the refund that had been sent to a cyber criminal. So in Apocalypse Drift, that same act is done by a foreign power, but to the tune of about 30 million false returns. And it doesn't send the government over the edge, but it sends the markets and the banks over the edge. And everything slides off from there, and then they do the cyber attack on the infrastructure.
Well, it's a really good argument for keeping a little cash outside of the banking system, and whether it's in a safe or in a coffee can in the garden, it might be a good idea to keep a little around, because those type of things happen, and just it doesn't have to be China attacking our grid. It can be one guy that breaks into your bank account and cleans it out, and you may get it back in 6 months, but what are you going to do for those 6 months while you're waiting for all that to get hashed out and resolved?
I think that cybercrime is one of the top 5 most serious event triggers in our future that's possible, that's realistic. Obviously, natural disaster would be one. Economic decay with failure. The acts of a foreign power or foreign entity, be it an act of war or terrorism. You can go through various scenarios of what would trigger an event. And most people, I don't think, pay enough attention to cybercrime, and how serious that could really, that could get out of hand pretty quickly. Look at just the recent stories about all the Target and the credit cards and all of that. If they hacked Wells Fargo and Bank of America, and maybe Chase, they're going to get what? A large percentage of U.S. citizens could find themselves several days without access to their funds, maybe several weeks. So yeah, all of that kind of coincides with why I prepare, why I'm a prepper, why I believe in self-reliance.
One of your practical handbooks is the Homeschooled Shootist. Some folks just don't have the time or the money to really dedicate to the type of advanced training that they really need to be truly prepared. Can you give us 3 tips from that book to help folks be more proficient with their weapon?
Sure. Tip number 1 is to take what we used to call, when I played baseball, a swing weight. Golfers also have them for their clubs. It's a donut that you slide down the bat, and you see, if you watch baseball, you see the batters in the on-deck circle warming up with a weighted bat. And then when they take the weight off, the bat feels much lighter, and their muscle memory and training is enhanced. Put a swing weight on your weapon and do your remedial exercises. Dry fire the weapon at home with a weight on the end, and you will be surprised how much it improves your target acquisition, your capability to engage multiple targets. It even strengthens your arms to the point where you can perform recoil management for follow-on shots to a much more efficient level. So that would be tip number 1. Tip number 2, for your particular weapon, experiment with various weights of ammunition. Every rifle is different, even if we're talking about a rifle, and since it's a carbine book, every rifle is different. And even within the same make and model, even the same lot numbers, there are minor differences in the barreling and the chamber. And if you experiment with different weights of ammunition, depending on the twist rate and how the tolerances on the chamber, you can gain 1 inch at 100 yards, 1 MOA, most people refer to it as, and you can gain accuracy off of the weapon without spending a bunch of money if you're going to be going out and shooting the weapon anyway. I've had rifles where I've gained 2 inches of accuracy just by changing the weight of the ammunition. Once you find ammo that's a good fit for your rifle, that's what you stock up on, that's what you train with, that's what you practice with. Number 3 is don't zero a battle rifle. Align the optics, align the sights, but don't zero them at a fixed distance. And the reason for that is, if you zero a rifle, the intersection of the optic and the round with the drop of the round, as the round leaves the gun, it drops. If you zero a rifle at, say, 100 yards or 75 meters, or pick your distance, different guys have different opinions. If you zero the rifle at that distance, then close in, your shots are going to be high, and far off, obviously, your shots are going to be low. I don't zero a battle rifle. What I do is I align the optic with where the round lands vertically at the same height as the optic is above the barrel. And that way, close in or far off, I still have the same level of adjustment. Holdover is what people call that.
Very
so,
cool.
Do weight training. You can increase the accuracy of your weapon. Talk about that for just a second. Why is accuracy important? Okay. You being an accurate shot during a gunfight is not important. You'll hear the term thrown around, combat accuracy. The weapon is capable of combat accuracy or battle accuracy. And what that means is typically that the bullet will be consistent within 2 to 3 inches. And so if you take a human-sized target, 2 to 3 inches from the center of the chest to the left or the right, it's really not going to make that much difference. But here's why accuracy of the weapon becomes important. Your ammunition is going to have a certain amount of inconsistency in it. NATO standard for an AR-15 platform, a 5.56 NATO round, is just right at 2 inches, I believe. So right there, every round you fire has an inconsistency of 2 inches. If your weapon then has an inherent inconsistency of another 2 inches or 3, now you're at 4 or 5 inches off. If you're snap firing, you're nervous, you're scared, your palms are sweaty, your heart's racing, you're in a gunfight, you may die very quickly. You're not going to be that accurate anyway. So that 4 or 5 inches that you can gain at the range when you're practicing, that may save your life when it comes to snapping that weapon up and taking down a threat.
Good advice. Now, you also wrote without rule of law. Now, the folks in Argentina know all about that. Their police went on strike last December. I think about 5 people were killed, and that's about the same amount of people that are killed or injured each year on Black Friday in America. If we can't go buy a $5 toaster without killing each other the day after we give thanks to God for all the blessings we have in this country, what would it look like in America if the police went on strike?
Oh, that's obviously the worst nightmare. Especially if it was, if tomorrow the Fort Lauderdale police went on strike, the city police department, you would still have state troopers, you would still have county law enforcement, you would probably maybe even have some federal presence. Could be the governor would even call in the National Guard for the city. But if it was all of Florida that went on strike, that called in sick, whatever you want to call, think about it, however you want to think about it, now you've got a problem. The Florida National Guard can't handle that. There's just no way. They could barely handle Miami, I imagine. There's not enough of them. They're not properly trained. It would take too long. And if things got really bad, National Guardsmen are going to want to protect their families at home. So that's the worst case scenario, when the law enforcement no longer responds to 911 calls, and the bad guys, the desperate people, the fringe of society that does not abide by rule of law most times, they're going to know that. They're going to know that the police aren't coming. I can go do whatever I want. Look at the LA riots. And that's when things get really bad. That's when preppers and every citizen really needs to be able to protect their family and their property.
Now, and without rule of law, you cover Maslow's pyramid of basic needs. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I kind of enhance Maslow's. So, in order to give a little background here, if folks remember back to the Second Gulf War, when Iraq fell, when Saddam disappeared, so did all of the law enforcement. So did most of the infrastructure of the government. And all of a sudden, practically overnight, you had this vacuum of security, really. And I think everybody remembers the outrage when the National Museum of Art or one of the big museums in Baghdad was looted. And, 3,000-year-old treasures were gone, and all of do you remember that? That was, I think, in all the headlines back here on ConUS. And that opened my eyes, that whole experience opened my eyes to kind of something that most people don't think about. If there isn't security, nothing happens. And you can study Iraq, you can study Somalia, you can study a lot of different places where the government control, the rule of law has evaporated. And what happens? Well, the bridges don't get fixed. The farmers don't bring their produce to market because they'll be robbed. The lower elements of behavior in society all of a sudden become commonplace and acceptable. Piracy, looting, murder, vendetta. And so you see that any place in society where there is no longer policemen responding to 911. We saw that somewhat in New Orleans after Katrina. So without rule of law, what I did with Maslow's hierarchy is I kind of inserted and said all of these things are important: shelter, food, the social element, all of those things are important. But without security, none of that happens. None of that happens easily. Another way to look at it is you can have all the food and water down in your root cellar or stashed out in your garage that you want. And if a guy with a bigger gun comes in and takes it from you, it didn't do you a bit of good.
Yeah, that's true. You got to be able to defend what you got, and it might be a good idea to have some stuff cached away where you can give the guy with the bigger gun something to get him out of your face, and then still have something that you can go dig up later.
Yeah. Now, my philosophy is, and this philosophy is, adamantly projected in all of my nonfiction works, is the best way to establish security is for no one to know you or whatever you're trying to secure is there. Hiding in plain sight, keeping a low profile. A lot of people call it, OPSEC or operational security. You hear preppers talk about all the time. I don't want anybody else to know I'm prepping. I don't want my neighbors to know I've got a house full of food and water. They'll be over asking me for it. What a bad situation that would be. And so without rule of law is really focused on how do you get travel, how do you go about your business and remain anonymous, remain out of sight, remain hidden. And so it goes through topics such as how to evade pursuit. It strives to cover a lot about camouflage, both urban and wooded camouflage. A lot of people don't know very much about urban camouflage, how to hide in a cityscape. It also talks about how to scavenge, a topic that is very offensive to some people. We warn them in the description of the book, hey, there's some, pretty hardcore stuff in here, but if your preps are taken from you, or there's a tornado, or a flood, or Godzilla steps on your garden, and you've got to survive, I don't recommend looting supplies from other people. But if there's warehouses, society full of food, and society is gone and not likely to come back, going and scavenging food from an unoccupied source, I think is within the rules, whatever rules there are in that scenario. But so we go through how to scavenge, how to get into a building, how to make a looter's bag or a drag bag, those type of skill sets. We also recommend in there something that I was kind of surprised how many people reacted to it, said, I'd never thought of that. Right now, in Fort Lauderdale, do you know where the food storage facilities are?
I don't know where they're at.
And you can find them on Google. You can go to your local grocery store and, obviously don't do anything illegal, but follow the truck back to where it, delivered the load from. Where are the distribution centers? Make note of them. Print them out. Run a Google map of the area. Note them on there. Because you're not going to have internet if the grid goes down. And that way, if things do get out of hand, if there are two events, one event causing the collapse of society, the other event causing your preparations to evaporate or go away, then you at least know where the big caches of food, medical supplies, things like that are. And it may make the difference between you surviving or dying of starvation.
Now, what are a few things that people can do to make their home harder to invade? Or maybe just to make it a harder target, or maybe to decrease the chances of it being invaded, like you said, making it sort of blend in and camouflaging it and making it look like it's not an interesting place to go?
I'll tell you, one of the first things that I would do is I would go to the rag bag and the old furniture out in the garage, and I would scatter those around my front yard. Make it look like my home had already been looted. We also go through, if you've got some spray paint, if you think about it and you can work on it a little bit, you can make your place look as though it's caught on fire. Would be discouraging to a lot of people. Why bother looting it? Another thing that we go through is, so those are hiding in plain sight type of tricks. Those are, there's nothing here, move on, Mr. Looter. Go on for another target. That's more likely to, have something worth breaking in for. To harden your home, I'm a big proponent and spout off about it all over the internet and the airwaves of what I call survival nets. These are 1 inch, 3/4 inch to 1 inch square nets. You can use them for, they're in my dugout bag. I have several at home. You can cover your windows and doors with nets, with netting. Buy some little screw-in hooks, put them around the door frame, say 20 of them, hang a net over a window or a door. You still let in light, you can get it up and down, it won't damage the value of your home if it was a false alarm. And take it from a guy who has done his share of breaching and teaching how to breach. If there's a net covering a doorway, I don't care if you've got a pound of C4, that it is going to give someone trying to enter through your door, your window, just a really bad time. You can hang little bells on it and for noisemakers. So if someone tries to pries open the window and they're trying to cut through your net, you'll know that they're there. And surprise is always the worst enemy. If you know a team's trying to come in, and say a team of looters, thugs, predators, whatever you want to call them, and you have time to get to your weapon, they're in trouble. It's not going to be a good day. So we covered I could just go on and on and on listing little, inexpensive, don't hurt the value of your home. We don't recommend anybody dig slit trenches or install punji stakes or any of that type of thing. There's just all kinds of little common sense, non-harmful things that you can do in your preps that will make your home more defendable. I'll throw out one more. Range cards. A range card is just a 3x5 card, or you can do it on your cell phone. You can do it, in a notebook, however you want to do it. But where you either walk off the distance to known landmarks around your property, or use a laser rangefinder. A lot of hunters have those now. And you have predetermined spacing. So that mailbox, the neighbor's mailbox down the street, that's 400 meters. That big thick tree over there that's about half leaning over, that's at 250 meters. Because at 400 meters, if there is a conflict, if there's gunfire, at 400 meters with an AR-15, you've got a pretty serious holdover. And if you don't know those distances, when you're scared, when your family's in danger, when the wolves went crazy and you don't know what's going on, that's not the time to be figuring out your holdover, if you do have to fight. So, and that's something you can do in an hour on a Saturday morning. Costs nothing.
It's another great tip. Can you tell us a little bit about your other book, The Teotihuacan Tuxedo?
Yes. So that is for beginning preppers. It is, and if you served in the military, where you've carried a kit, or you've slapped on a chest rig, or a load vest or a plate carrier, and then you don't need to buy a tuxedo. You already know all that. What we found in the rifle classes, especially ones that required movement, was people would show up with various configurations of gear, magazine pouches, slings, different type of vests and things like that. And we used to call them litter bugs. By the time they'd ran through, say, an obstacle course or a shooting scoot, you would see pouches and equipment and multi-tools and all of this stuff scattered. They left breadcrumbs, basically, of where they had been. And if it was a multi-day class, then you would, it would smell like a sports locker room the next day. And so what tuxedo stresses is if preppers after an event are going to find themselves carrying around more stuff. And it's not all fighting stuff. They're going to be probably always want to keep a weapon on them. Well, most people haven't carried a weapon at the same time that they throw together walnuts. They don't know how, or their sling's not configured to do it properly. Will you have a medical kit on you, a blowout bag or an IFAC, individual first aid kit? Will you have that on you at most times? If you're out digging in the garden one day or working in the garden one day, you may have shears, a small spade, your gardening equipment, if you will, and you're still going to have a weapon and water on you. So, just like a soldier in a theater of war has to carry more and still have his hands free, I think preppers are going to be in that similar situation. And it surprised me with the classes, something that was just so obvious and natural, and you'd learned over the years how many people didn't know how to do it, or to get it, what they should be looking at, how it worked. I've seen people show up with MOLLE pouches where they run the straps down the back of the ladders and snap them shut. Well, that's not the right way. You weave them in and out of the ladders. And if you just do that, if you just do it the way that they were doing it, just behind 2 or 3 ladders going down and snap the closure, they'll fall off. If you have to run or crawl or go prone, they'll fall off. So that's what tuxedo is about. A lot of people have said, well, all this information is available on the internet, or this is, basic infantry knowledge. Anybody that's been through the infantry knows this. Absolutely. All of that's true. But for $5 or $7, you can save yourself a lot of searching, and, you don't have to go to Fort Benning and be in the infantry to learn all of that stuff.
Yeah, that'd save a lot of time right there. Now, how might a prepper configure a MOLLE tactical vest differently than a soldier?
Well, I think preppers, let me give you an example right off that always comes up. My prepper loadout, I only have a couple of magazines. And a soldier would typically have 6, 8. I've seen guys walking around with 10. The soldier is expecting to fight. The soldier is expecting confrontation. The prepper hopefully is thinking to avoid it. I carry around, my prepper load is enough ammo for me to get out of a fight, not to win it. So, there's one big difference there. Preppers aren't going to be able to have MREs, most likely. If you're, today, if I go deer hunting, there's tens of thousands of guys every week that go deer hunting. They know that they're going to be back. They're only a couple miles from the truck. They've got some power bars in the truck, and if they can get in the truck, they're typically an hour or 2 or 3 at worst away from a Pizza Hut. I don't think if there is an event and society breaks down, you're going to be carrying more food. You're going to have to carry water purification equipment on you. The soldier typically is not. They may have a couple of iodine tablets just in case, but they're not. They know they can go back and fill up at either the fire base or wherever they're staging their operations out of. The prepper may not have that luxury. So a lot of the equipment's the same. A lot of the, soldiers don't carry around the tools to scavenge. They don't scavenge, very seldom, I would guess, but a prepper might. So that's really the differences. It's just, you know, and the beautiful thing about Molly, Alice equipment, ALICE, is also falls into this category. I know a lot of guys love their Alice gear. But the beautiful thing about Molly and the military type load vest is they are configurable, mission configurable. So if you're working in the garden one day, then you're shoving your trowel and your clippers and your bag to gather up the potatoes in your vest. If you're worried that you saw a gang of potential looters in the neighborhood the next day, then you can pull those off and you can put on extra magazine pouches and have more ammo with you when you go to check it out. So mission configurable becomes really important for the prepper.
Well, that's just a lot of really, really good advice, Joe. We really, really appreciate you coming on the show. We're going to have some links to a few of your books in the show notes today. Now, for folks that like to connect with you, they can find you on Facebook. And do you also have an author page on Amazon?
Yes, I have an author page on that. Just do a search on Joe Nobody, spelled as it sounds.
And that's your birth name, right?
Yeah, no. Actually, my name's Joe Smith. No, I'm kidding. And then on Facebook, it is joe.nobody.author. And there is a web page that's currently being completely redone. We're getting close to being there, but there's still some good stuff on the existing one. And that is www.holdingyourground, all like it's one word, .com. So www.holdingyourground.com.
Very good, and we'll have links to all of that in today's show notes. Joe, thanks again so much for taking time to come on the show.
Oh, I enjoyed it and look forward to it. You're doing it again.
This episode is brought to you by CampingSurvival.com. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including bug-out bags, long-term storage food, water filters, gas masks, and first aid kits. Check them out online today at CampingSurvival.com. Be sure to enter coupon code PrepperRecon for a 5% discount on your entire